anyone else's kitchen look like that right now because I have given produce away to our neighbors and we are still just like loaded down. Hey y'all, how's it going? Brooke here from Seed to Plate channel. Welcome to the June garden tour. I'm a little sleepy. I just woke up. I'm just sitting out on our patio set drinking my coffee. Also, if you're in the South and you have access to an H-E-B, I don't do flavored coffees very often, but the pecan flavored coffee from H-E-B, I think it's H-E-B's brand. So good. So, this morning for our garden tour, we are going to start out here at the backyard garden. If you've never been here before, I have two gardens. I have our backyard garden at our rental house. It's all been built and based on a no-dig method. The newest bed was built in January. The newest bed was built in January. The oldest beds were built last September, so are almost a year old. So just want to tell you that before we jump into this, because I think a lot of people think that you have to have a really long established no-dig garden for it to be successful, and I can show you that that's not true. So the garden definitely looks different. It's very humid and hot here right now. These are our worst months. Like, by far, hands down, these are our worst months. Like June, July through September, it's just hot and sticky and gross and humid. So there are a few things that you can definitely grow. Some things are transitioning out, but I will shut up and start showing you some plants. Also, I know it's like not the most ethical thing to do in the world, but I bought a bug zapper because the mosquitoes and the flies are so bad, because we live in an older neighborhood where they planted all of these trees that are not very well managed, and so there's just trees everywhere, and mosquitoes love the shade. So if you heard that loud popping sound, that's what that is. Here are the Mexican torch sunflowers. They are getting super tall. That fence is about 6 feet tall, so they're probably, I would say, at least 7.5. But a lot of them are kind of like not looking as good, so I might actually like really trim down the plants just to give some breathing room to the stuff down here, which are all herbs. So that's mint that did not do very well in that pot. And then we've got some parsley, lemon balm. These are zinnias that something chewed on. I think a grasshopper might have gotten to them. This is pretty like classic grasshopper damage. However, our Great Dane also likes to munch on things, so really, who knows. I've got basil that I surprisingly haven't used that much this year. Lots of peppermint, parsley, and then this is cinnamon basil once it starts to go to flower, and the bees love it. Here is our little sunflower patch that I don't think is doing very well because they're flowering very, very small. So I think what happened is they just got overshadowed by the tomato wall. It's urban gardening at its finest. Trash trucks. So like I was saying, there's a bit of a story going on with the tomato wall. So I'm going to tell you before I show you. Basically, the people who lived here before us, we live in a rental house, the people who lived here before us fed the neighborhood cats, aka they were feeding the wildlife. Like, if you put food out for a cat, I guarantee you it's not just a cat that's eating it. So please stop. But yeah, we have a massive squirrel issue. This is something we've had an issue with for a very long time. This is nothing new. My next door neighbor had actually sent me a photo that he took last year of a squirrel eating one of their tomatoes, like sitting up on the fence. And I was like, ugh. So the season was going well, and they hadn't touched anything. Nothing. They had not touched one thing. We also had that like crazy 30 days of rain. So what I read was that when squirrels take your tomatoes, they're actually looking for water. They're not actually looking for like the tomato, which makes sense because I started finding tomatoes with like one bite taken out of them, which honestly is really fucking rude. I say that very distinctly because, like, if you're gonna eat my tomato, just eat the whole freaking tomato. Don't just eat like a bite of the tomato and ruin the whole thing. This whole issue hit an apex when this squirrel cleared my entire grow bag Paul Robeson plant. There were 5 fruits on it. It took 2 or 3 bites out of each one, dropped it, and even dropped some on the other side of the fence in my neighbor's yard. 5 of my favorite type of tomato. I was lividly pissed off. So we were trying to put like some aluminum foil, right? Like, I definitely thought our neighbors were gonna think we're totally nuts. They're scared of the shininess of the aluminum foil. You can also do like Christmas ornaments. I just don't really have that many great places to like hang Christmas ornaments, and it'll also help with birds. So this had happened. It cleared my plants, but like my plants, like my other plants, were still pretty fine. And then one day I came out and it literally looked like this squirrel had taken a leap of faith from the fence into my plants. Let me show ya. These were my paste tomatoes that stood, I don't know, about that tall. And so the squirrel broke branches, and it literally took a leap of faith into my tomatoes and just destroyed the cages, and the tomatoes were sitting on the ground. Yay. Now, tomatoes are pretty resilient plants. Honestly, I'm probably going to leave it for a few more days and see if it lives, but there's probably not that much fruit I'm going to still get off of these, to be honest. And that kind of takes me back to I think my biggest garden fail of this spring and summer, and that is my paste tomatoes. So I killed it with Roma tomatoes last year. I did so well. This year I killed it with my heirlooms, like my slicers and my cherries. But I actually planned on 10xing my paste tomato production because I wanted to can a bunch of tomato sauce. Between the squirrel taking the leap of faith into my tomatoes and the curly leaf virus I had at my community plot, that was where most of my paste tomatoes were. I had to rip all of them out, which you'll see here in a little bit. That, you know, it was just a fail. That's just what it was, and that's okay. That doesn't mean I'm a bad gardener. That doesn't mean I have to quit paste tomatoes. That just means it was a rough year for paste tomatoes, and I learned a lot. So one thing that we have done to try and fix the squirrel problem is I went to our favorite garden store, The Natural Gardener, and got this. It's called squirrel repellent. I don't know that it works. However, I have not seen that squirrel again, and it hasn't taken any more tomatoes. So I'm gonna go with maybe it does work. It's just a bunch of like oils, it's organic. Anyways, so that's the whole squirrel story and the paste tomatoes. A little bit sad, to be honest. That was why at the beginning of the video you saw that big box of Roma tomatoes that had like green ones. I ended up just pulling all the tomatoes I could find off of the plants. But at least they had like a chance of getting ripe. If we ignore this monstrosity, all the rest of the tomatoes are doing really well. So these are some red Brandywines. Somebody told me once you can't grow big tomatoes in Texas. And to that I say, I bet that one's close to a pound, and I bet this one is pretty close to a pound. I just pulled a bunch off of this black crim plant that were really nicely sized. My Cherokee purple in the back, I think that one's pretty done. There's no other fruits in there. And then my yellow Brandywine was actually a red Brandywine. So I did not get any yellow Brandywines this year, but that's okay. There's always next year. You're gonna start getting stuff like this. This is just, we had 30 days of rain and it's hot and it's humid, and I should come in here and prune some of this stuff off and, you know, kind of clean up the plants a little bit, but I'm not gonna lie, I haven't had time. And then these have actually been a tomato that I have surprisingly really loved. These are yellow pear tomatoes. They're just really sweet, they're really tasty, they're not overbearing, they don't have too much acid. So these yellow pear tomatoes, and honestly these Sunrise Bumblebee tomatoes, I think these have been my favorite cherry tomatoes just for like fresh eating this year. I think I'm gonna do like a whole tomato like kind of wrap up and, you know, kind of tell you guys what I think about all the tomatoes that I grew this year, because there were definitely some that I was kind of like, I could do without that. But overall, the tomato wall is, I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's getting to the point where the blossoms are just falling off. I just saw some. So like this is what happens when it's too hot outside. The blossoms will literally just like dry up and just fall off the plant. And so these are probably the last fruits I'm gonna get for the year. I talked about this before, but to me, like, trying to get your plants to survive through the humidity and the dead-ass heat of the summer, especially with tomatoes, which I would consider a high-maintenance plant, they require a lot of pruning and a lot of attention. To me, it's not worth it. For some people it is, and that's great. You know, everybody has different philosophies, but to me it's not worth it for the small crop of tomatoes that you get in the fall. So I am going to be ripping all of these tomatoes out probably by, I'd say I'm probably going to rip all of these out by like, honestly, early July. I might keep them like through the 4th of July and then rip them out. And then I actually have a plan to do something fairly low maintenance, which is like a really beautiful sunflower wall. I'm gonna do big mammoths in the back, so the big yellow ones. And then I have two other kinds. I have one called Evening Sun that's red, and then I have one called Velvet, which is like a really beautiful orange color. So I think I'm just gonna intermix in here and do sunflowers. Sunflowers are really good for the soil. They're actually considered a soil conditioner. And if you have ever grown sunflowers and tried to pull that up, the roots go so deep into the ground and they really break up the soil in a really nice way. So, and also just wanted to mention, this is my no-dig bed that I did in January. So I established it in January and then I planted it mid-March. So I did give it some time to kind of like do its thing. But I mean, no dig method for you. He's not ripe yet, but if I let him get ripe, something else is gonna eat it before I can. So yeah, if you do the no dig method properly, I mean, this was all just grass. I literally laid down cardboard, I laid down potting soil. I have a video where I did it all, I'll link that here. Our grow bag tomatoes, which are doing really well. This is my Paul Robeson that got completely stripped. I think I'm probably just gonna cut him down, honestly, because the blossoms that he has, the blossoms that the plant has are just dying and falling off. So like, what's the point of watering it and putting resources into it? These black print snapdragons have been surprisingly one of my favorite parts of the garden. And this little area where I've just got lavender and these snapdragons, it's just really pretty. And then the marigolds are coming in pretty strong. This bed in the last garden tour, I believe, was some zucchinis. The zucchini got by the squash vine borers. That was obviously a pretty big bummer. But what we've got in here now is we have these are other summer squash that are really short. And then in the back, we've got Kajari melons. So these Kajari melons will kind of start to flop over and crawl along the ground. Now I did already find, is that a grasshopper? Jesus. I did already find some squash vine borer eggs on these squashes. So that's just something here where we live that you have to be really diligent about. As annoying as it is. I have considered putting like a hoop over here and like covering it. I just don't know that that's worth it to me, to be honest. What I call Lana's boon patch. Our Great Dane loves raw green beans, and so I grow her some green beans every season just for us to pick for her to snack on. Now this, I am like the most proud of this. right now. These are my cucumbers, and the whole like arch trellis thing was kind of a weird dream of mine. It's so pretty to have like this beautiful green archway. Oh, and it looks like there's a cucumber to pick. So these are the cucumbers. I like, you can let them get a little bit bigger. I like picking them when they're this small because they've got these little pokey things on them you gotta get off. I like picking them when they're on the smaller side because I just think they have a lot more flavor. But there you go. I purchased transplants. Again, our Great Dane loves the garden. The garden doesn't really love her back all the time, but the Great Dane, she ate Lana ate my cucumber transplants a couple of times. So I really should be like where we're at with the cucumbers right now. I'm like 2 weeks behind of harvesting, but that's okay. Not the end of the world. There are bees that come visit every day, and I noticed a different type of bee yesterday. And if you guys grow cucumbers, you know that you really got to look in the plant because sometimes they'll hide from you. But there's tons of little ones that have gotten pollinated and are growing, so that is very exciting. Oh, yep, see, there's one hiding from me down here. Oh, and that's a big guy. That one actually still looks like it's gonna taste pretty good. Hold on. Now this one, the way you know that they're still gonna taste good is they'll get really white or like yellowy on the end. That means they're probably not gonna taste that good. But these will. Our dogs love raw cucumbers. I also love raw cucumbers. And so usually if I'm cutting one up to eat, I'll give a few slices to the dogs. And last week when I did that, I didn't realize that it was so bitter on the end, and it actually made our one dog, Cooper, throw up. Oops. And then I tasted it and I was like, oh, yeah, buddy, I understand. Sorry about that. This is like my proudest moment right now. These cucumbers are a little bit slower on the draw. These guys I direct seeded, however, they're producing way more normally because of the timing that I direct seeded them. And oh shoot, there's another one. Oh, I can give him another day. So this bed's a little bit of a mess right now. These are some Jarrahdale blue pumpkins that I seeded. They're off to a slow start. This is left over from the garlic that I grew. These are like little cloves that didn't make it out when I pulled the garlic, and so they're just like growing more garlic, which is cool. And then I just have grass and stuff that I need to get managed. And then I was about to pull these plants, which this guy needs some support. So I was about to pull these plants. These are Armenian white cucumbers, and they just weren't doing anything. And then, literally just the other day, I saw that. That's the first fruit, which is pretty exciting. So these guys are a little bit slower on the draw. I'm not really sure why. I don't see the pollinators come over here as much. So I was hand pollinating, but I've kind of stopped doing that because it was just too much work. Is going to be the next big beautiful bed, and these are sunspot dwarf sunflowers, so you can kind of see them starting to form in the center. But then this is all okra. So okra grows really well here in the south, in the deep south, and it looks like I'm gonna get my first blooms here. We've got burgundy okra, Clemson spineless, and then an orange type of okra called Jing orange okra. And then I've got some nasturtiums like interplanted randomly. But this all looks really good. I'm really excited. Okra gets really tall and it produces a lot. So I'm really pumped about that. And then these are a few more sunflower varieties that I planted that are growing really well in these grow bags. Here's a cherry tomato. He's kind of falling over and just doing his thing, which is fine. Sunflowers are one of those really low maintenance things that you can grow when it's really hot outside, that they're just really pretty. You can eat the seeds if you want. They bring in the pollinators. They don't require that much water. They're pretty drought resistant. So like this time of year, I'm trying to think about maximizing the beauty I get out of the garden while also thinking about my resources, because I don't want some exorbitant water bill for the sake of the garden. Obviously, you're gonna have a little bit more of a water bill when you garden. That's just how things go. But, you know, if I can try and mitigate that at all, I will. My strawberries are finally actually doing something. They're tiny, but they're happening. Be the first one that I'm eating. Now, these are June bearing and ever bearing. Oh, that's good. That's really good. I'm not gonna lie, y'all, I'm a little bit of a strawberry snob because my mom's side of the family's from Southern California, and that is just like strawberry and citrus. So good. It's all so good. And so I'm a little bit of a snob, I'm not gonna lie. Here is Tomato Alley. Now I did have to top a bunch of these tomatoes, so some of them are looking a little sad, but they're holding on pretty well. I think there's some super ripe ones hiding in here. But yeah, the tomatoes just really struggle this time of year. There's just really not much that they're gonna be able to do, honestly. However, I really hope that these ripen. These are the Brad's Atomic Grape. I just want to try them and potentially get the seeds. Ooh, big caterpillar. Hey, buddy. I think I'm just gonna let you live your life. And then these are the Golden Jubilee, which I have one inside that I haven't eaten yet. Just some Rutgers. Like, this plant looks like shit. It has no fruit. Oh, it has one fruit on it. This is just the time of year where I'm probably a little aggressive with, like, culling plants. Like, I'm just like, you're not doing anything, you look bad, and I'm not gonna get anything from you, so you gotta go. Like, I just don't have the time or patience to help a plant that's already struggling to survive, that doesn't really have that much time left in the season. So if it's struggling to survive, like getting one tomato out of a plant that I have to water every other day for the next 3 weeks, it's just not worth it to me. So I would like to empower you. You don't have to get sentimentally attached to your plants. I get sentimentally attached to some plants, but it's okay. You can get rid of the plants. So the garden is actually in a state that I wouldn't normally like to show on a garden tour. However, I started a new job this week, and so life's just been busy. Like, I've been really focused on working and just doing other things, which is not a bad thing, by the way. So that's what's going on with the backyard garden. We definitely have some work to do, and the July garden tour of this garden, I'm sure, will look very different, but we'll see how it all goes. So now we're gonna go over to the community plot. Y'all, look at these beautiful sunflowers people are growing. Oh my God, they're beautiful. Welcome to my community plot. There's lots of new things going on in here. So let's just take a tour, shall we? If we start in this corner, we've got some sunflowers coming up. I don't know what variety they are. The calendula is petering out, but that's to be expected. Have a couple more sunflowers that are coming up right here. And then these Illumination zinnias from Baker Creek are like Oh my God, they're amazing. I'm not that much of a pink person, but look at that. It's beautiful. So the zinnias are doing really well. I truthfully don't remember what type of zinnia this was, but it's pretty. And I have some other smaller zinnias in here around the border. I don't know what that guy is yet because it hasn't opened up. But there's just a lot of blank spaces that I'm hoping to fill in the fall. So that's kind of what's going on there. And then if we keep walking around the border, the tomatillos are, y'all, freaking out of control. This is 3 plants of tomatillos, and I just, there's so many of them. I don't even know what to do with them. And actually, if you've never grown tomatillos before, you know that they're ready to pick when, let me find one that's ready to pick. Oh, look at, this was a self-seeded meteor zinnia from the fall. So you know that these guys are ready to pick when the husk turns yellow. I have to be somewhat careful this time of the day because the bees are out in like full force, and we have a couple of beehives here, so the last thing I want to do is like stick my hand into a big thing of tomatillos and the bees be like, hey man, what's up? Let's look. You want to feel your tomatillos to see how full these little lanterns are, but ultimately you really, that's a stink bug. You really want to look for when they look like this. So when this husk is like yellowed and starting to dry, that's when they're ready. And sometimes the husk will like kind of peel off, and sometimes it won't. So just look for the yellow husk, feel it to see how full it is, and go from there. Oh man, I got peppers to pick. Holy shamoly. So if we keep going around the border, this is an El Dorado zinnia that's like freaking beautiful. It's the most beautiful shade of orange. And then there's just some more. Honestly, this has all gotten a bit wild. This is my neighbor's plot. Has like these crazy Willy Wonka like pole bean towers going on. I'm kind of about it, and he's sharing, so that's fine. But it is pretty funny. Like this one is completely just falling over. We keep going in here. This is all peppermint that I've been harvesting for tea, and then we have more mint, and then these are Queen Lime red zinnias. Now these ones are really beautiful. They're supposed to be lime in the center. They're not as limey as I want, but I'm wondering if the blooms will just get better with time. The first bloom was truthfully really ugly, so I'm hoping that they get better. The seed packet was a really old seed packet. Like I got it at a store, and I realized after I bought it that they were seeds from like 2018. That doesn't mean they won't grow. They'll definitely still grow. That just means that they might not grow the way that they would have. Biggest change in this garden is this half. So the last time we were here, this half was my tomatoes. Like I've said a few times, they ended up with curly leaf virus, and curly leaf virus is and isn't preventable. So I could have used some contaminated soil, or it could have just been white flies that passed it. I try not to spray my tomatoes as much as I can, especially at the beginning, but if I would have sprayed them, they probably wouldn't have gotten curly leaf virus. So here's the funny thing. I planted cantaloupes. I started them in like little containers in my backyard, and they hadn't been coming up, so I kind of I was like, okay, whatever, I'm still gonna use the soil. So I stuck pumpkin seeds in there, like 2 different kinds, didn't label anything, and a bunch of the plants started coming up. So these could be pumpkins, or they could be cantaloupes. I have no idea. I don't know what these are. They could be something. I gave them plenty of room, so hopefully they'll vine out and kind of really suppress the weeds. It is kind of nice to walk through here, to be honest, but like these weeds, ugh, they're the worst. But the pepper plants are still producing. They definitely look bad. They don't look good. There's lots of like yellowing leaves. Peppers don't seem to do very well with the humidity that we have here, and these leaves kind of just fall off. But these Anaheims have been super tasty. I've been harvesting them a little bit younger, but they're still producing really well. The habanadas, these are the unspicy habaneros, it looks like a few of them are finally starting to kind of turn orange, but they've been like this really pale yellow color for a while. The shishito peppers are still trucking along. We're still getting plenty of those. And the mini bells are still doing pretty good. I don't know why the chocolate mini bells are larger than I have a red mini bell over there, and the red mini bell is just so much smaller. Not really sure why that happened. The shishitos are still doing great. My poblanos are really starting to produce, which is great. This giant plant, which didn't produce fruit for a very long time, this one's finally starting to produce. My serrano peppers are out of control. Like I can't give them away fast enough. The bell peppers are pretty done. Like, they still have a couple bell peppers on them, but they're like super tiny, which is fine. They're still good to eat, but they're just not that like big bell pepper that you want. God, I can't believe how many freaking serranos are on these plants. Thank goodness a lot of the people at this garden like love super spicy peppers. I mean, they'll just come. I've told people, I'm like, just come pick them, come take them. I don't want them. I have too many. And so they do, and they just love them. They'll just stand there and eat them and snack on them. It's awesome. More Anaheim peppers. These bell peppers are just like, they're just kind of funny looking now. Like, I don't know that these bell peppers are really gonna give me too much more. And what else do we have here? We have jalapenos. So the jalapenos are also doing pretty well. They're producing a lot, and they're pretty happy. The peppers seem to do really well in the heat. You just have to keep them watered enough. I will say, I had a viewer ask me to talk about watering this time of year, because obviously it's very hot. Watering's important, and I really only water my garden like 2 or 3 times a week, which I know, like, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that new gardeners make, is they overwater their gardens. It's definitely an easy mistake to make, but just as an example, when I pulled up the tomatoes in this bed, because we had so much rain, like that 30 days of rain, the roots were so shallow. They were so shallow because they don't have to dive for water. So you really want your plants to like really work for the water and get a good root system going. You want that. So I almost take my plants to the point of being stressed so that I can do that. So I water really deeply, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Like, really, I don't water that often because, like I said, maybe this is just from me being from Arizona. That's where I was born and raised. So like, water conservation is a really big deal when you live in like the freaking desert. So for me, and this is why I talk about this stuff so much, planting varieties that do well in your area, especially in the South, or if you're in a hot climate, like, that is so critically important, because there's certain varieties that are drought resistant. There's certain varieties that are just gonna do better. And so in terms of watering, what I do, flood the plant for probably like a minute or 2, and then it'll soak in, right? So that gives the roots plenty of water, but also you're not wasting water. And obviously this is one of those situations where, like, if your plant looks like shit, like if your plant looks like it needs water, just give it some water, you know? But like, I really, really try and conserve my water consumption for a couple of reasons, both because, you know, I don't want to pay a super high water bill like nobody does, but also, especially here at the community plot, if you mulch properly and you have at least a couple of inches of mulch, you don't need to water. So like, if I'm questioning whether I need to water, I push aside the mulch and I dig into the soil. I dig like a couple of inches down, and if it's still moist a couple of inches down, I wait another day. So that's really the key to like getting yourself some really strong plants and not wasting your resources. Because here at the community plot, I mean, water's not cheap. Like, I mean, nothing in this world is cheap, right? But like, water is really not a cheap resource. And we are here at this garden, we consider ourselves an affordable community garden. So that means we try and really like minimize our expenses like a lot, and that means we try and conserve water. So you know, not using too much water here is very important because we have a water bill that we have to pay. That's the reason we're able to stay at the community garden like this, because we pay the water bill. You know, this is prime real estate where we're at. So if we have any issues paying the water bill, I mean, downtown Austin is right there. So just to kind of like go over the whole watering situation, I really try and be really smart about my watering to conserve resources, which is incredibly important. Like, if it has rained in the last few days, I don't water. So I think like the more you get to know your plants and your soil and really just get your hands in it, like there's really no other way to do it. So you know, if that means you dig down into your plants and see what the soil is like that's what you need to do. Don't be afraid to get dirty at the end of the day, because that, to me, that's the best way to figure out what your plant needs, is by actually getting your hands in the soil. So I think I watered, today is Tuesday, I watered these plants on Saturday. That was when I was here last. So just really like think about water conservation as much as you can. I know for some people that's a little bit easier than others, but I would say one thing that's really going to help you extend your season in a hot climate and be most efficient with your watering, I cannot overstate the importance of mulching. Like, mulching is so critically important. It helps protect against weeds. It helps, you know, really conserve water. Like, mulching is the absolute best thing you can do for your garden and your sanity. I'm a much happier gardener this year that I've been mulching so aggressively, because there's just a lot less maintenance. There's less weeds. There's just less everything. And I use native cedar mulch, which is also a good pest deterrent. So yeah, my biggest tips on watering is make your plants hardy by not watering too often. So just a couple, I would say like maybe 2 to 3 days a week. Do not water every day. That's like the biggest party foul that most gardeners make, is by watering every single day. Because your plants aren't gonna be very strong at that point. So with that being said, the only caveat to this whole thing is if you've got seedlings in the ground and it's really hot. So seedlings, their roots are automatically gonna be a lot shallower because they're smaller plants. And so you've got seedlings, the roots are just so much more shallow. And so you need to get the water to the roots, right? Or else they're gonna die. So for these seedlings that I put in the ground, I did have my plot neighbor water them. I watered them the day that I planted them, and then I asked her to just water the seedlings the next day, just to make sure that their, you know, roots got plenty of what they needed. So that's my tip for watering. The only other thing to say is the only plant where I water from the bottom strictly are tomatoes. So you can see what I'm doing now. I have my finger over the hose and I'm kind of blasting the plants a little bit. And so, I mean, some people have strong opinions about this. My plot neighbor, like 2 plots over there, her name is Shuli. I probably talked about her before. She is a 90-something-year-old woman who, I don't know how long she's been gardening, but she's a fabulous gardener. She barely speaks English, but she told me one time, because I was watering just on the ground, and she's a very like natural-ish gardener. In my eye. She asked me one time why I was gardening the way that I was gardening. Or watering, I'm sorry. She asked me one time, she goes, "Why do you water like that?" And I told her, I said, oh, well, like, you know, tomatoes don't like it when the leaves get wet. And she goes, but it rains from the sky. Like, and I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. So like in the natural process of water, right? And like the way that plants would naturally be watered from the rain is like the leaves get wet, right? Like that's logical. And so when she told me that, I started becoming a lot less concerned, like a lot less concerned with if my plants were, like if my plants got wet, basically. Like obviously you don't want them to be too wet, that's not good for them. But if they just get a little spritz, it's like really not that big of a deal. So those are all of my thoughts on watering your garden. The only other thing, which I accidentally just did, but don't do this, is just be careful of the bees. So if you've got bees pollinating your garden, just be careful not to like hose them down, because then they can't fly around. So if I notice that there's bees, like there's bees on my tomatillo plants right now, so I just put the hose at the base of the plant and I'm just watering it that way right now. So yeah, I don't think there's like a one-size-fits-all approach necessarily. Those are just my thoughts being in the southern states and trying to conserve resources. And to me, you know, like ripping out my tomatoes and planting sunflowers, to me that's a way to still have like that garden beauty without wasting the resources for a small payoff. The year of the pepper has gone very well, I would say. But thanks guys so much for watching, and thanks for joining me in the June garden tour. I appreciate you guys. You guys always have so many amazing things to say and contribute, and so much amazing advice. Like, I have learned so much about gardening from community, both like here at the community garden, but also this community here on YouTube. So thanks so much for watching. Leave a like if you like this video, subscribe if you would like to see more, and we will see you next time.